Okay, I'm going to plough straight ahead. So welcome back, everyone. The time has come, as I said, for our songwriter panel, and I am joined by some heavyweights in the music industry who will be providing insight and sharing knowledge with us today. So I'm just going to do a few brief intros, and of course, completely out of order because I wrote this more than just now. So, starting with Joel Marr, also known as Jolistics, writer, poet, producer, rapper, multi-instrumentalist and performer. Beats are in Joel's blood. As a teen, Joel was the drummer for punk and hardcore bands, but soon looked to rap and hip-hop as other forms of beat-driven expression. His first rap project, TZU, a collaboration with other local Melbourneian rappers, formed in 1999. The group went on to release 4 studio albums, 2 of which were nominated for the Australian Music Prize, and another nominated as Album of the Year at the 2008 J Awards. Under his MC moniker Jolistics, Joel took a solo approach, releasing 2 albums under the Elephant Tracks imprint. Expanding beyond this, Jolistics diversified into areas such as writing and performing spoken word, and projects involving the merger of soundscapes and visual images, film, animation and dance. These projects commonly draw on concepts near to his heart, cultural identity and growing up in Australia as a person of mixed race. Collaboration continues to play an integral part in Joel's projects, writing and producing with artists such as Haiku Hands, Missy Higgins, Hermitude, Moju and Madonna. Yes. Resulting in an ARIA Award nomination and international acclaim. Next, Dallas Frasca joins us today, a powerhouse not only vocally but as a force in the music industry. Among multiple accolades earned by the band, which carries her name, Dallas herself was nominated for Artistic Excellence at the inaugural Australian Women in Music Awards. Demonstrating that women really can do it all, Dallas established her own record label, Spank Betty Records, through which the band's record Love Army, and EP Dirt Buzz were released. Dallas has also extended her love of music into mentoring, working with Indigenous women in the NT who want to engage in music. Dallas has played over 1,000 live shows, some of them alongside acts such as Ugly Kid Joe, Patti Smythe and Aerosmith. And her love of touring overflowed into the creation of her own music festival, Hitched to the Sticks Festival, which has been known as a magical mystery tour, and this is my favourite bit, with a no dickheads policy. That's true. Yeah, I like that. Now, while we're talking about women who love to rock, we have Imogen Clark. Imogen's in the midst of a run of 100 shows in 100 days. Imogen has come a long way since her first single in 2015, having released 2 albums by the age of 23. Her work has earned her the respect of renowned songwriters such as Johnny Diesel, and more recently resulted in collaborations with Colin Hay from Men at Work, Ben Montench, the keyboardist from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and Joji Malani from Gang of Youths. You might have guessed that Imogen lives for gigs and was performing 70 to 80 shows in pre-pandemic times. Some of those alongside the likes of Shania Twain and Ian Moss. But not to let a global pandemic deter her, during the past 2 years, Imogen still squeezed in some touring, released 2 EPs, 2 Christmas singles and a live record, while still finding time to mentor young artists in Sydney's Talent Development Project. Over the page. Yo, you ready? Songwriter, performer, multi-instrumentalist, including guitar, music director, photographer, DJ, cook, runner, amateur outfielder and producer of audio content for a wide range of platforms including radio, television, video on demand, podcasts and audiobooks. While this list of credits may seem expansive, Yo's musical style is even more so. With more than a decade of releases to his name, Yo writes and produces based on what moves him, drawing on personal experiences but combining these with widely relatable themes, relationships, racial injustice and loss. This approach has amassed him an audience responsible for around 30,000 streams every month on Spotify alone. Yo not only collaborates with fellow musicians and performers to make incredible music, but as a means of addressing racial equality and cultural identity by creating community and providing a platform for other Asian and Asian Australian artists. Yo is featured on Triple J's Like a Virgin, played the festival circuit across the globe, and solo toured in places as far-flung as Ecuador, but happily is here with us today. Whew. So please, let's welcome this panel. Now, very similarly to our initial conversation with George, I'm going to start right at the beginning. So I'm throwing it to everyone. Where did your love of music first come from? Who wants to lead? Imogen,
go for it. Because I'm sitting here? Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Do it. Is that why you guys sat there and you let me sit here? I grew up in a quite a musical family. I was lucky in that way. My father is a musician still to this day. He was a professional musician, punk bands, rock bands, all through Sydney in the 70s and 80s. They used to, support people like Cold Chisel before they'd really broken the market. And he still has music as part of his life. He's now a high school teacher, but he has music as a sort of a side hustle in his life. And he just had musical instruments lying around. And I was really lucky because he wasn't precious about me playing them. My brother, my cousins were all musical. We would get together and make little rock bands, and we were like 8 and 10 and 12 years old and just, singing rock music, and we didn't understand, what we were doing at all. And my dad was a songwriter as well as a musician, so I didn't think that was weird. When you grow up with that around you all the time, you just think that that's normal. That was as normal to me as having a parent that was a lawyer or something. I thought that having a father that wrote musical plays for his students in his high school and wrote all the songs in it and wrote the entire script and then would, work with the students all year round on these plays, and then he would go out on the weekends and play gigs in his Led Zeppelin cover band, and I'd be there 12 years old, not allowed in the pub with my mum, just, watching him. I thought that was the most normal thing ever. And so I was really lucky because that, was just such a part of my growth as a kid, and I was just able to absorb all of that and pick up instruments whenever I wanted, and the love of it came so naturally. I never wanted to do anything else. It was just there from the moment I can remember.
That's awesome. I wish my parents were into music, but my dad was a big Bob Dylan and jazz fan, so he had an incredible and still has an incredible record collection. My mum was into soul music. She liked the Neville Brothers and Al Green and Ann Peebles. But it was actually my older sister, and anyone who's got an older sibling will know this. You just inherit the musical tastes of the older sibling because they're cool and they know stuff that you don't know, and they're probably, they know secrets to life. And so my sister had originally she had a boyfriend who was really into like Gil Scott-Heron and then early hip hop like De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest and stuff that to me sounded really cool, but was, I guess, my real introduction was like Guns N' Roses and like Metallica, and then eventually like Dead Kennedys and the Butthole Surfers, and that's my music. That's the stuff that I found, and I think probably my introduction to music was I was a skinny, weedy kid at high school. I didn't play sport. I was, I was probably more prone to substance introduction than your average 14-year-old. And I found music and I went, that's just so cool, and I don't need to do all this other stuff because that's me now. That's what I do. And my mum just told me this story. She was down in Melbourne just recently, and she's like, I remember when you came home one afternoon, you said, I play drums now, Mum. That's what I do. And that's that. She's like, as soon as you said that, I was like, okay, he's going to be okay. So, yeah, to be fair, to be frank, my parents' support played a huge part in it. They were like, he's into music, he's going to be okay. So, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I feel like we were sort of brought up around the same time
Yeah.
Metallica, Gunners. Did you go to that
I
concert?
didn't go. I was in Sydney.
I was there.
Yeah,
I was there.
Like Skid Row. Guns N'
Skid
Roses.
Row, yeah, it was super cool. I started playing music like a lot later by accident. I was about, I think, 13 when I saw the film Crossroads, not the Britney Spears one.
Oh yeah, Rough Much. Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
And the music in this film was done by a musician called Ry Cooder, wrote all the music, but Steve Vai was totally in that film.
He's the devil, isn't he?
He's a devil. I met him years later and had my first found girl moment and freaked him out. But I got a photo and I've got it on a coffee mug at home. Yeah, I saw that film and was so taken away, by this blues music. That sort of stuff wasn't playing in our house. We had lots, mum and dad had really good taste, but I was so blown away and started getting guitar lessons. So just sort of dabbling, but really obsessed with music, and sort of put me on this path to discover where this music came from, and and joining the dots with music history, and that sounds like them, and this fascination. But I played around. I had the fantasy of being a rock star, you know what I'm saying? And I was probably 18, and I was at my own housewarming in the backyard party, and there was a few friends jamming, and there was a friend, I've never thanked her for this, she probably doesn't even know this, but she was singing really badly out of tune, and I was like, what are you doing? And I just started singing like, I'll cover up for you. And not really, but I started singing in tune, and the boys who I was jamming with like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And I was like, sick as. Like, we should start a band. I was like, yes, sick as. And within maybe 3 or 4 weeks, I'd started a band. I played my first live show, and that was it. That was 100% it. And it's just an obsession. Like, once music chooses you, it's game on. So, that's the answer, I think.
Season 1.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, you're not even close to being done, so that's great. I grew up in a really small town. No, it's not that small. Geelong. There was a radio station called Bay FM, 93.9, I think was the frequency. And my mum was virtually a single parent, and so we would drive a lot. There's a lot of commuting when you live in a town of that size and you live a little bit further out in the suburbs. And I heard a lot of and loved a lot of like Stevie Wonder and Harry Connick Jr. on the radio. And at the age of 7, I decided, unfortunately, that I wanted to play piano. And I bugged my parents, and obviously a piano isn't cheap, so I started on like a toy Casio. Yes. With the like 1, 2, 3, hey DJ, like all those little samples, the 3 buttons and stuff. But from there, eventually I managed to get mum very graciously bought me a very cheap student piano on the condition that I practiced an hour a day. And I fell out of love with music for a little while during that period. But, years later, it turned out that at school, I really struggled with a lot of subjects, but music was one that I didn't struggle with because of my mum's support, making me practice. And so my theory was sound, my ear was sound, my oral skills were sound. And then from there, it was like, well, if music is the thing that I'm good at, then I'm going to pursue that. And then so I went on to study at university, and then I started writing my own songs. 1 or 2 got picked up by national radio, which was a real gust of wind under my wings. And I've kind of just followed my ears and my nose since then, and now I'm here.
Nice.
Yeah.
So both you and Imogen had talked about starting out at really young age, like 7 or 8. Were you writing songs at that point, or was that something that came later?
Well, I was actually just singing. So I had, my dad had heard me singing at home, doing a little silly play that my cousins and I had made up at family Christmas. And there was a skit where I had to sing. And my dad was like, I think you have a voice, and do you like singing? And I said, yes. And he said, well, I'll take you to learn singing. So that was all I was doing. I was classically trained. So I was singing operetta and musical stuff, which is so weird when you consider where I've ended up now genre-wise, but that was my introduction to it. But the singing was everything at that point, and I wasn't writing for quite some years and I always thought, I love this, I love to sing, but I don't know if it's what I want to do for the rest of my life, until I wrote my first song when I was about 12 or 13. And then I went, this is what I want to do. If it was just the singing, if someone told me you can sing for the rest of your life, but you can't write any songs and you can't perform those songs, I don't think I'd want to do it. I love to sing, but the songwriting was what really cemented that in my mind. And since that day, I've literally never wanted to do anything else, even once, even in the hardest period of time. What about you?
Yeah, similarly, having a classical background and like training, you're basically taught to play these songs that are like, hundreds of years old, and you're just like, okay, I'm not going to write anything like this, but I guess I don't know why I'm here. I'll just do this. Oh, that's right, Mum's going to punish me if I don't do this. But like, I think in grade 7 or something like that, I downloaded a pirated version of Fruity Loops and just started messing around with like instrumental electronic music. I was like really into a producer back then called Fatboy Slim, and he would do these kind of cool loop-based breakbeat tunes, but with like a 303, and you could kind of emulate that with like 16-step sequencing and Fruity Loops. And so I just mucked around with that. And then after that, I discovered, hip-hop and jazz, and dove in after that. Yeah.
Okay. And now you've also talked about supportive parents and influences from older siblings and parents. Has there been any other kind of mentors, maybe self-chosen ones or ones that have just found you in that kind of early part of the journey?
I think that every band that I've ever been in, the people that I played in a band with have been the mentors that I've really directly still relate to. I don't feel like I ever had an older individual who lived in the woods who was, wise beyond their years and passed on information. I wish I did. I mean, I think as a young man, that's what you need. But I definitely feel like I learnt with my peers, like learning and I think the other thing worth pointing out is I think all of us probably started pre-internet, so maybe not, I don't know, maybe not you two.
Definitely.
Yeah, so before YouTube, when you wanted to learn how to use a sampler, you read the manual.
Yeah.
There was no video that said this is how. So my mentors were people who read or studied more than me and then just showed me because I learned better in that situation. So yeah, definitely bandmates, and I guess my first introduction to producers. My band, the Mechanical Bum Cheeks, I think you mentioned them. We had an illustrious career. We won the Balmain Battle of the Bands.
Yes.
We won. Our prize was we got to record at a professional studio. This is when I was 14 years old, and the producer there introduced the idea of miking drums and of capturing sounds and of laying down takes as a whole band or individually, and that just blew my mind. That was like such a, like, 'cause I guess I'd always thought music was just you're on, you play, you finish, that's it. And then the idea of recording and the concept of a recording studio, I would say that producer was quite key in some ways of being, whether he knows, I don't even remember his name, whether he knows it or not, of introducing a concept which has kind of grown and exploded out since then in terms of recording.
Yeah, like I'm from a regional area, so I was one of females that was playing music in my area. And so there was, lots of boys around me, and, that was like, it was the 90s. So it was like total rock explosion and really big singers. And so I think my inspiration were a lot of those. There was a lot of bands around the area was going, well, if I'm going to be able to get up on those stages, then there was this sort of healthy competitiveness going around. So I'd start singing louder and start, listening to, or going and watching them play, and then going, okay, great, well, we need to step up our show, or, like maybe we can bring lights in. maybe we might bring a sound engineer, those kind of things. So it was really, there was a healthy competitiveness that was going on around the area. But yeah, I really feel like just the same, just sort of looking around you and watching bands being the inspiration. But really, I feel like I had my own machete paving my own path in a sense, because there were no sort of other females doing it, I suppose, which was a little bit different. So it was just get up there and do it.
Still only about a 20% female membership of APRA AMCOS too, just probably worth mentioning. So it's great to see so many ladies in the room today.
It's a thing I noticed too.
Yes.
That amazes me. There's so many wonderful female creators in this country. It really surprises me that it's so low.
It is low. But staying on the topic of inspiration, what about other sources? Is it always music, or are there other things? Like, you know, our panel up here are creating so many different types of output. So are we drawing on art? Are we drawing on literature? Talk about some of your other forms of inspiration.
Yeah, I'm a massive poetry nerd. My parents met at Macquarie University studying literature, and they got married on the campus later, and they're massive poetry nerds. So it's so ridiculously cute. And so we would have, you know, like little nights at this is such a weird thing to say because I didn't realize it was weird till later. But like I would tell people like, oh yeah, sometimes, you know, on a Friday night, you know, my dad will be having a glass of wine and we'll all be at home and someone will pull out a poetry book and read a poem and then we'll all like cry about how beautiful that poem is, and then someone will read another poem and people would look at me like, are you in a cult? Like, what's going on? Are you all right? But it was this love of like how powerful words are. And so I went on to, my brother's named after T.S. Eliot, who is my favourite poet. And so I will often read my toolkit of songwriting things that help me. If I get stuck, I have a little pocket book of Leonard Cohen's poems. I have a T.S. Eliot selected poems. I love to read poetry when I'm feeling like I'm a bit blocked. So that will always be a huge inspiration to me. But likewise, I've also been inspired by a lot of, TV shows or films or fictional characters in books. You know, it comes from everywhere, and I find that really helps when I'm getting stuck doing the same thing over and over again. You know, when you're just writing autobiographically, you can get very bogged down in that. So I find, you know, using other mediums for inspiration can be helpful.
I would say that the other sort, like music, and I wonder how many people in this room feel the same. It's like it became one of the best coping mechanisms for life. So everything you do gets filtered through a way to release the tension and the pressure and the possible confusion you have through this language. And so it's almost like everything is inspirational, and everything that you're trying to process, from your latest heartbreak to your, you know, most wondrous moment with your newborn child, all of those things get channeled and funneled into music. But I think for me, one of the big, breakthroughs or keys or something when I started to write songs was that, like, I'm obsessed with story. I just love stories. Stories, whether it's Game of Thrones or whether it's reading Dr. Seuss to my 2-year-old daughter or whatever it is, the art of story is just, we're all just kids sitting at the foot of someone's telling a story in some regard at some point in our life. And so if I get any form of writer's block or something, I go to great stories, like whether that's TV and film and comics. I'm a huge and always have been a huge comic fan, but novels as well. And like I was talking to my friend and we're like, wow, man, there's so many people who, the only thing you read is on a screen. And that's kind of weird because it's really awesome to go through a book, to get halfway through the book and go, I'm halfway through the book, I'm almost done, and then get to the end and just go through that whole journey. And so, I don't know, that's for me still, story underpins everything, I would say.
Love that. Yeah, I'm a little bit different with it. I love melody. Like, I remember being, 5 years old and making up songs and making myself cry. Just got a little bit of emotion about it. But I've always been, and I've had to force myself into the space with words, and ended up studying, did a grad cert in English literature during lockdown, which was really, really helpful, like, you know, with that story and expanding your vocabulary and all that sort of stuff. I'm in a really different space with that. But, you know, I sort of fall into that category of, you know, they say that what is like 60% of people listen to the lyrics and the other 40% listen to the melody. I'm a melody girl. So I really have to force, and that's been really challenging because I'm a songwriter and I want to write these wonderful lyrics. And, you know, I really, I suppose, relate to what you're saying, Imogen, where now I read a lot of poetry, or, you know, I'm forcing myself into situations that sort of, you know, to broaden, to expand what I have been writing about, because more often it is personal experience. And then I've been writing for films. So writing to a brief, that's a different thing, because you know the story already, and then it's putting the pieces together. I mean, we could talk about this stuff all day. We're here to do that.
That's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah, but yeah. So I'm really inspired by that first point. Well, not always, but really, I tune into that melody, and that's been my attachment, you know, to song for a long time.
That's really cool. I think I can relate to all of your experiences with inspiration and where it comes from. One thing that I kind of leaned on for a lot of my earlier career was, like, I didn't have like superb lyrical skills or whatnot, but I could like shape sound to do things that I wanted it to do. So what I would do is just try and capture a feeling. Like, it could be something really sad, but there's no beginning or end to it. It could be just like, my heart is actually just broken. How do I make that sound? And so that would be the thing that leads me. And it doesn't, like, I think one of my earliest songs that had a few legs and got a few plays on SoundCloud had literally one line looped over and over again, which was, "Don't you know my heart can be broken?" And that was just played over and over again for a bit, and then I would mute it and the music would continue, and then I would bring it back, and like the whole thing painted a very sad boy picture, but like that's like all it was. But it's still considered a song because of all the textures and stuff that are in it or that aren't in it. You know, like creating space is really important as well. So I do think that storytelling is really, really key, and that is its own form of it, but it doesn't have to be long-winded. It can be just a section. It can be a short story. It can be a word. It can be yeah.
And stories are told with the instrumentation and the music anyway,
100%.
so it's not just the lyrics that tell the story.
That's right.
Wow, yeah, that's really kind of thrown me a little bit, because I think I was going to ask more about, well, your lyrics are quite meaningful and you communicate a lot through them. So, yeah, to find that one of the songs that I guess really resonated with an audience was just such a simple lyric. Do you find that you spend a lot of time then rewriting or trying to phrase the wordier of your songs?
I think in most cases, the simpler it is and the more direct, I think George Maple spoke about this as well, the more effective it is. I do think these days, now that I'm a little bit more mature, I try and be pretty with prose and like clever with rhyming and soft rhyming and all the things that you learn from a textbook or whatever, which I think it's really cool to write that way, because, you know, we all listen to that kind of music as well. But it is nice to know that if you don't have that in you on the day, it can be just a few words, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess, Joel, I was thinking with you as well, with rap being obviously communication through verbosity, and it being a platform for social change, for minorities to speak out. Is the lyric then more important to you in some ways because of that?
Yeah, I would say that that's how that was definitely my priority when I was deep in rapping. It was your pen game had to be strong if you were going to get up and write rhymes. And as Yo was saying, there's so many technical things, and to approach rhyming couplets and inside rhymes and schemes and crossing the bar and all of the, you know, the sort of elements of formulating a structure for a verse are just as important as the verse and what you're trying to say. So there's multiple layers, but I would say if you don't have anything to say, and there's a lot of rap songs that have nothing to say, you can still admire the technical ability of what's going on. Hello, Eminem, you know, it's amazing, but you might not totally get with the story. But then vice versa, there's a lot of really amazing lyricists who don't have maybe the technical skill, but have a lot to say and great stories. And I probably didn't respect that as much in the beginning. I wanted the form or the structure to be sound, and now I'm a little bit more open to all of it. So is the lyric more important? Definitely not these days. I'm making a lot of instrumental music, and I still feel there's a narrative in instrumental music, and I feel deeply drawn to the subtlety of sound, like the texture of sound. I'm not classically trained. I haven't really had much formal training. So for me, sound is like the melody in people's speech, the sound of my rattling car, like things like that. I fucking love it. And probably also coming up with sampling as one of the key elements is like everything is music and everything can be captured and used. And now that we've all got recording studios in our pocket, not your genitalia, I mean your phone, like you literally can capture anything and it's awesome. And so, you know, I find that these days, yeah, the lyric is still important. I still put, probably I'm one of the 60%. I put a lot of emphasis on what you're trying to say because there's enough, for me, there's enough vacuous shit in the world that I don't need to add to it. Like, if I'm gonna steal someone's 3 minutes, I want them to walk away with something, even if it's just a smile or something. I don't relate, and it's probably sitting in the producer chair a lot these days as well. It's like I just don't have much patience for stuff that is empty in a way. And I guess like part of the journey is how do you communicate that? How do you work on stuff? And what doesn't mean it needs to be deep. It doesn't mean it needs to be like, you know, but this can be studied in uni. It just means that it's got to come from an authentic place. That's all it means. And that can be, and 100% that is simplicity. But it doesn't need to be anything. It can be whatever this particular person, the weird energy you make between you, that's what, you know, as long as you're true to that, you're on the right path.
Well, that actually leads really beautifully into process. I feel like we've got sort of two artists who are working maybe from even a studio in your pocket, but a studio base as opposed to maybe a more guitar base. So yeah, can we talk a little bit about your processes? Where do you start? If it's not lyrics, are you hearing a guitar riff in your head or?
Yeah, look, it's always different. I've been of recent mindset of writing my lyrics first, and then that dictating what the music should sound like, so that it's not the other way around where I have, you know, sometimes I can struggle if the music is written. This is everything I'm saying is like also not valid because
it's like the other way you've done it as well.
100% and really successfully, you know. But it's whatever sort of like helps you focus or whatever. But I found I'm having more success at the moment writing the lyric first and go, all right, what does this sound like? Is there a badass riff happening here? What is the rhythm of the phrasing? You know, and then the melody developing and things like that. So that's going to change next week too, people, I'm telling you. But that's really been my process at the moment. And then I might get say I've got a bit of a verse and a chorus together, then I'll go, great, now it's time to fill in the blanks. So I will sometimes it can really flow quite naturally where you're going, but at the moment, I will decide on a form. So what structure I want it to be in. So for example, might have an intro with a hook there, verse, chorus, bridge. I'm making this up as I go, chorus, and then, you know, maybe a hook to finish it like that. And then it's filling in the gaps after that. So I'll put together, put the lyrics down. Maybe I've only got a verse and a chorus. But what it helps me to do is finish my fucking ideas. Yeah. Because all of us, I'm sure I can speak for all of us, we've got so many amazing ideas sitting in our phones. So I've been really, So, and also on top of that, a part of my process is discipline. So I set timers for myself because I don't actually believe in songwriter's block, guys. It's actually about... Controversial. I totally don't. I'll talk about this in my workshop a bit today, but I don't. And I've been sitting there going, I don't know what to write. That kind of energy. But actually because I haven't had the tools in front of myself to go, well, hang on, here's a bunch of approaches that I could use today. So it has been, for me, building up those tools, particularly over the last few years, because I just don't believe in it. It's just that you haven't got something to draw from. So for me, going back to that process, that really works for me to sort of like fill in the blanks because, form and structure can be boss or can be your king in a sense, and a really bloody good title as well. But you don't also have to. No. So yes, having that as a focus is a really part of my process to finishing the ideas. A bit of a routine to go, okay, this is the next step.
I like to think that you should never keep the same process all the time. I love hearing that you're like constantly changing what you're doing, because I'm exactly the same. I feel like because when I was young and started writing songs, I was about 12 or 13, it would always go the same way. I would be, and this is again something I'm going to talk about in my workshop this afternoon, it would always be, I'd sit down with my dad's acoustic guitar. I would pick out a little folky riff, and then I would start singing nonsense over it, and then that nonsense would turn into lyrics, and that was always the order. And I even used to sit in the same place on my parents' balcony in the Blue Mountains looking out over the mountains, and after a while, surprise, surprise, all my songs started sounding the same because I was always writing them in exactly the same way. And then over the years, because I kind of moved from a folk country world where I was when I was younger into where I am now, which is a more rock pop sound. And that changed my process naturally. I used to hate co-writing. I used to just sit there and do it by myself. It was a very intimate thing that I wouldn't let anyone else in on. And then over the years, I've changed. I was writing things as poetry and then setting it to music and letting that dictate it, just like what you just said, Dallas. And then these days, I'm finding myself loving and even preferring co-writing. I'll go to a studio with a friend who I know is a great producer, different people in different times. When I'm in different cities, I'll just go into a studio with someone. We'll talk about some references. We'll put on some songs that I've mentioned as references. They will start building a track. I will mess around with some melodies that will then turn into lyrics, or I'll come in with just a bit of a hook, and I love that process now. And if I had showed that process, a snapshot of that, to me when I was 12 or 13 years old, it would have scared the shit out of me, and I would have never believed that I would have ended up there. But then again, I love to do that now, but I'll still sit down with my acoustic guitar and pick stuff out. I just think it has to change all the time, because if it doesn't, you don't get the versatility that you really need as a songwriter, I think,
Well, that's great. That's exactly where I wanted to go. Collaboration, because everybody here has done incredible co-writes and releases with other artists. So, maybe we just open it up very broadly, like a stellar kind of co-writing experience. Let's go with a good one, and then you can throw in a bad one if there's one you'd rather not repeat.
Do you want to? We'll go in a thing. Sorry, I'm talking so much. So my probably the best co-writing experience I've had is the one you mentioned with Colin Hay. I adore Colin Hay. I think he is one of the best songwriters that I've ever heard and certainly met. I was in LA just pre-COVID and writing for an album and also recording what would then become a couple of EPs. And I had just had an experience where, sorry to bring the mood down a little bit, but I just had an experience in the previous few months where my guitarist and musical director had lost his battle with depression. So I was very much grieving Glenn's loss. And I couldn't write this song by myself. And I knew I had this session coming up with Colin Hay, and I was so nervous about it. And part of me thought it was a really big risk to bring in such a vulnerable idea to a session I was already so nervous about with a hero of mine. But I decided to sort of just throw caution to the wind, because I thought, I want this song that I write with a hero of mine to be really special to me. I don't want it to just be something where, it's just kind of a surface level song. And so I just opened up to this person whose music I've been listening to my entire life and whose voice I have idolized, and and it was such a weird experience because it was like a therapy session. I walked in there and I was like, hello, nice to meet you, Colin Hay, who I've listened to all my life. I'm at his house in Topanga Canyon, and I'm like, it was such a surreal thing, because then he was saying, I've been through a similar thing and I've lost somebody to suicide, and we're talking to each other on this level that is such a reminder to me of the importance of songwriting and the importance of music, even for people who aren't songwriters, because that brought us to the same level. Colin Hay is this multi-award winning, incredible songwriter, and I feel like, an emerging artist, and in that moment we are just two people discussing shared grief. And that was so important to me. And then we wrote this song together, and it's a bit of a surreal blur. And then Colin very graciously agreed to put his vocals on the song as well. And so it was almost an experience my most positive collaboration experience, definitely, but also one that kind of reminded me of how just how important being vulnerable is in songwriting, and being able to open yourself up to a really scary experience, because it's really scary to let your guard down and show somebody the scariest, deepest, most frightening parts of yourself, especially someone you admire and who is a hero to you. So yeah, that was a really important day for me.
Okay. Let's talk about a shit one. Let's talk about Madonna.
That's the one I was going to ask about.
It's a weird. This is a good, maybe a good indication of the modern music business, because I've never met Madonna. I did a songwriting session with my friend Dustin McLean in a lounge room in Fitzroy, and then Duzzy was doing sessions with a producer named M Phases, and one of our sessions ended up in M Phases' hands, and then M Phases doing a session with a guy in LA, and that particular track ended up in his hands, and then that guy had a session with Madonna. So, 6 sessions later, a melody that we had written ended up in Madonna's track, which, by the way, Nas is the guest rapper on that track. It's called Ven Vedi Vici, and I'm way more satisfied with Nas being on a track that I've been a part of than Madonna. I know, both of them, they're dope. Anyway, 2% writing credit, so nothing major on her least selling album. So that's my shitty songwriting experience. My really good one is with an artist named Moju, who was aka Mojo Juju back in the day, and we worked on a song called Native Tongue together. Yo used to play in her band. We had been writing a few songs together, and at one point at the end of a session, she was driving home and we were just talking. I was standing on the road and she was at her window, and she's like, hey, I've got these two lines for this song. I haven't really written the song yet, and it was I don't speak my father's native tongue. It was just that one line, and I was like, oh my God, that is that is such a good line that I relate to, being half Chinese, being, growing up in a sort of multicultural Sydney with not feeling like a part of mainstream Australian culture. That it resonated and hit me, and I was like, wow, we got to do that. We got to make that a song, and you got to work on that idea and develop it more. And we kept doing more and more sessions, and I kept bringing it up, and we kept kind of just not getting the engine started for the song. And then we had a session, and I had a beat, literally just kick and snare. That's it, coming from an MPC. I put it on. The kick had a tone to it. I think it was in E or something, and Juge, I put the mic on and she'd written all these lyrics, and so she just started singing, and there was no instrumentation at all. And she did about a 15-minute take. And I know because I was looking at this session today, I'm going to open it up in the workshop. I want to look at a variety of different sessions. And this one started as just drums and an a cappella. And then I went in and edited that a cappella into verses and choruses, and we worked on it, and we got a choir and blah, blah, blah. And it sort of grew. But that first session was like spine tingling. It was like, that was the moment. And I was like, and we had this crazy communication where she was singing. She never stopped singing, but I would write notes on my phone and hold them up, like this line quieter, this line louder. So we were like jamming in a weird way, dynamically. And she did, like, she had, I don't know, like maybe she had 2 verses definitely, but she had lots more lyrics, and also she sang all of the lyrics about 3 or 4 times. So I had multiple takes to go through and kind of choose from, but not in a, I don't know if anyone uses Logic or Ableton comping, but not in a comping way, just in literally just like a massive session. And so then it took me weeks after that to go through and kind of piece the whole thing together. But that has become definitely a process for me, is like I really love working with singers, and I like it when a singer can relax into a performance a bit longer than what they think they need to. So like, go longer, go get comfortable, do it a bunch of different ways. Like, just enjoy it, let the song open up for you. And then rather than, we might, I think we all go into recording sessions going, okay, I've practiced this thing and I'm going to do the thing and here's where I go, but what happens if you don't? What happens if you try it a completely different way? Because by the 5th time you've done it, you're hearing it and feeling it in a completely, like, it's new for you again. I can say that as a vocalist as well. And so you end up with this like freshness. And I do have this suspicion that some of the best takes are when people are a passenger to their own performance. Like, they're not, there's a kind of a release of the control, and it's not about, it's not like I need to do it. It's just like there's a certain Zen quality that kicks in, or a kind of a subconscious element is the door is allowed. I think someone says you're making space for God. Whatever it is, you're allowing a certain chaos to come in, and I love those takes.
That's so cool. I work at ColArts, and on the repertoire was that Moju's song, Your and Moju's song, and that was so hard to navigate, with the ensembles to really, it's a bloody good song and you can do it in so many different ways. But yeah, I really. There's no chordal. It's just a choir. That's right. How do you? Yeah, it's a really amazing song. I just want to say that to you. So cool, and really hard to cover. So I've had a different experience where I've really worked sort of like, insular with band members. So that's always been my collaborative process over the years. And then probably the last 8 years, I've spent a lot of time in remote communities in the Northern Territory working with Indigenous women, like helping them write their songs and all sorts of stuff with B. And that's been amazing, and I think that experience of really honouring the safe space and that vulnerability, I really, related to what you were saying, because there's some big stories out in the desert, and it's so big. So that's one thing that I always bring, no matter what, to those to go, okay, because it's like a therapy session sometimes. Like, you're talking about your biggest things, and to be able to create that space for somebody in that moment is like a really, I think, really great thing to bring to the party. And then just in the last sort of few years, I've done a bunch of different collabs with some songwriters that I've really admired, and I suppose really nothing amazing came out of these sessions. Maybe I'll probably never release them. Maybe I will, who knows? Maybe I'll go revisit and go, that was good. But you always pick up new little tips. Like, even if the song isn't great, it's like, wow, I never would have approached something like that. So they're so beneficial that you can bring to your own, and just keep building so that there's no such thing as songwriter's block. I've got a new little tour to go in there and join, know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I love that last thing that you said about like you wrote a bunch of stuff and it might not be coming out. I feel like some of my best collaborations and the most fun have been when the pressure is off and you're either with someone you know really well or you trust, and you might just get a house with them somewhere for like a couple of weeks and you just write together or whatnot. There's like plenty of I've had a few experiences like that, and the most recent one is with a writer called Tessa, who I was in a duo with called Hoodlum, and we've known each other for a really long time, but when we first got together, we were both in a very similar position in life. She had just quit her solo project and like basically let go of her band. I had let go of my band, and we were both looking for direction, I guess. And we were both broke. We were both like pretty jaded by the way things had kind of ended. And our first session didn't really go that well. Like we did something together and it was just like in a 1-bedroom apartment in my home studio. It didn't quite click. And then for some reason we both were just like, let's give this another shot. And then the next time we wrote a single that ended up getting a ton of plays and that gave the project some legs, and we kind of ran with that for a while. It eventually came to a close, and then she moved overseas, and then she came back like 3 or 4 years later and was like, I've got these new songs, stuff in the States didn't really work out. Do you want to just hang? And so we did. We spent like a week in Inverloch at the beach, and just like I brought my setup. And yeah, I don't know if those songs will ever come out, but I listen to them and I'm like, this is gold. Like, this is so much fun. And yeah, I mean, I'll talk about it in my workshop as well, but I just think if you can conceptualize or just try and convince yourself that the pressure isn't actually always on.
100%.
It's so much. It's a game. It's fun. You're just trying to make stuff, and yeah. And we'll all have the other thing is bad sessions happen, bad collaborations happen.
Also, there's so much to cannibalize. Like you can go through and be like, oh, that never came out, but I'm gonna take that beat.
Learn
it's so
much.
dope.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put that over here.
Totally.
So
Yep.
kind of like we're all bowerbirds, or just trying to
Nothing goes to
take
waste.
the blue thing.
Nothing goes to waste. It's all something that will either influence you in the future or something you can directly use. So yeah.
Or you end up with the legendary Prince vault, where there's just years of music still to come that we're just
I
waiting
have a
to
theory
hear.
about that though. I think there was also Jay Dilla's just put like a rapper just put out a beat tape, and it's like, I just got the last of Jay Dilla's stash of beats, and I'm like, he didn't put those out for a reason. Like, there's a lot of stuff I don't want anyone to hear ever, because it's what I needed to do to get to this, where it's like, even that I don't wish some of it I don't want people to hear. But you got to make some time for some mistake stuff and some stuff that's going to sound really just, it's the bridge to get to the good bit. Not the musical bridge.
But it could be. Have you seen the bridge? The other one. Now, I feel we can't have a discussion about today's industry without talking about DIY, and everybody up here has many strings to their bow. So we are down to the last 10 minutes, and I did want to open to a couple of audience questions as well, but is there maybe one element that you could name as being the key DIY? Is it social media platforms? Is it knowing the business aspect? Is it getting the right team around you, or not having a team around you?
I'm going in.
Do it. Yes, do.
I'm going in,
you
guys.
do it all.
I just think it's about learning as much as you can about the industry. It's coming to things like this. It's going to the master classes that Music Victoria put on, networking, and really understanding the industry, understanding what your revenue streams are, and they will also, this is your business. You are the CEO of your business. So understand who the people you will be employing, the teams that you're building around you. I think a lot of emerging artists, and including myself, I just want to get signed and get a manager and stuff. It's like, well, you are employing these people to be the CEO of your business when that, so understand what you want from those people, how the business works by going to all of these stuff, asking people, there you go.
That's really important. I think the more you know, you learn from doing as well. So DIY, if you do a lot of stuff yourself, even if you've never done it before, and you just try and you learn, you might make mistakes or whatever. But like down the track, if you're ever in a similar situation, you'll know what not to do, or you'll also be able to see like when someone's trying to rip you off, because that happens too. So if you've already booked your own shows and your agent's given you like a crummy fee or whatever, like you'll see that and you'll go, no, I'm worth more than this. Like this is not cool, or things like that. I also think it comes down to when you're in DIY world, like knowing yourself, because if you can also end up saying yes to some real naff opportunities that don't match you. And I think it's like you kind of learn at the start, you're like, I need every opportunity I can get because I'm broke or whatever. But I think one day you learn that you don't have to take everything.
That's right. No is just as important.
100%.
Yeah, yes.
Well, I feel like these are all things that I also agree with and feel are really important. I mean, just a few of the things that I've learnt in a little snapshot that I think are really important are work really fucking hard. Like, just work your ass off all the time. I mean, I feel, that being said, look after yourself. You also have to be healthy. Don't do a dumb thing like play 100 shows in 100 days. But just working, someone once said to me, if you have to be the first person awake and the last person asleep at night, honing your craft, getting to know the people you need to know, working on your skills. It's not enough to just be good at this thing and good at that thing and 1 + 1 = 2. It's not enough. It has to be 1 + 1 = 3, which is something that Bruce Springsteen says, and I think is really important. It's not just about being good. You have to go that extra mile. You have to stay hungry. You have to have things around you that, you have to be willing to make your own luck, but also make your own inspiration when it's not coming to you, like you're saying about writer's block. You have to be disciplined. Yeah. It's just not a coasting thing. It's a business, like you're saying, Dallas. It's not. I work with a lot of young people, like Nikki was saying, in the talent development project in New South Wales, and the biggest thing I think about when I talk to them is that, it's not just about, this is fun and I like to make music. That's great. You can have music as a small part of your life, as a hobby. You can have it as much of a side hustle as you want it to be. But if you want music to be your entire life, if you want songwriting to be your career, you have to treat it like a business and not just a hobby and a fun thing that you do after work or on the weekends. It has to really be your life. So work really hard and do the things that scare you. If you're DIY and you're doing, in the last few years, it has been the first time I've had a manager. Before that, I did everything myself from the age of 12 or 13. And I learned about what the rules of the business were. I got my first contract when I was 20. A record label signed me, Universal signed me, and I read that 48-page dense legal contract, read through it, maybe 50 to 60 times. I had a lawyer, but I wanted to understand every little clause in that contract so that no one could swindle me and turn around and say that they had rights that
I just want to say, I didn't read my first one.
But see, that's
I'm
the
like,
thing.
yes.
I'd heard so many horror stories about it, and I learnt from that. So you just have to, and I'm learning constantly. I'm no means an expert on any of this stuff, but you just always have to be learning. You always have to be doing the things that frighten you, because that's how you grow. So, 100%. Yeah.
Good one.
So these days, just to speak on that, what you're talking about, saying no to things, I think that is important. And to talk on that, I think these days I have these 3 rules. Like, if I'm going to do a project, it's either got to pay, because that's how the lights stay on. It's got to be either, if it doesn't pay but it's really inspirational, then cool, we can get with that. And if it doesn't pay and it's not really inspirational but the connections are going to be useful in the future, that's another valid reason. If it doesn't fall in one of those 3 categories for me, then I'm probably going to not say yes. And I don't think that there's, to saying no to a project doesn't mean that it's devaluing it. It just means that you don't have the capacity to do it the justice it needs. The other thing for me was I used to definitely navigate more of a personal artistic career, as in like Joelistics was a touring thing that made me a decent living, and then sort of pivoted to production a lot more in the last 4 years. Now I sort of see my career niche as a bit like a farmer. Like there's some things that are like some crops are coming up, like I'm going to do some solo stuff, or if I'm not doing solo stuff, I'll do more production, and when the production's not up, then maybe I'll do some co-writes that might plant seeds for the future. And then so there's like maybe 5 and I also have a 2 days a week where I teach at Box Hill Music TAFE. So there's a bunch of different things that all come together, and you'll be surprised because sometimes the waves hit all at once and you're like, oh my God, I feel overwhelmed by how much I have to do. That's a problem. So the biggest trick is to be good at planning and your day and knowing what your capacity is. But the other thing is to sort of block things out into times, and whatever you think, however long you think something's going to take, it's going to take 3 times as long. That's the basic rule. It's just, you think you can get your album written and recorded by August, it's going to take until December. Like, it's just the nature of things. So kind of still make those harsh deadlines, but know that you'll probably need a bit of give. That's one thing to think about.
That is great advice. Yeah, thank you. Well, we are really tight on time, but did anyone have a question for the panel? Yes.
Thank you for the discussion, firstly. How do you discover new music?
References from friends. Oh, sorry. Hello. References from friends. Honestly, I trust my friends' opinions, and I'll often, they'll just say, "Oh my God, I'm obsessed with this song," and I'll listen to it. Or from film and TV, or honestly, that's sometimes social media. Like, it all comes from different things, but word of mouth for me, old-fashioned, still the best, most important way I discover music.
That's the same for me. I was just thinking about I just found this band called Automatic, who was signed to Stone's Throw. It's awesome, and it was because B, in fact, just sent me a link on Instagram. So actually, weirdly, Instagram has become a really great way to just forward little snippets of things, and you're like, oh, cool, and then you can go to someone's page and go through stuff and find the taste that you want, and then go on to Spotify or whatever streaming platform. But yeah, I would say definitely my experience of co-writing is a lot of the language, and this is a blessing and a curse. A lot of the language is around references, so I end up finding a lot of new music through, hey, I'm really vibing this, which is shorthand for let's write something that sounds like this. And there's a point where I feel like references are just like, let's lop off the referencing from now on and just write what, we kind of know the general direction. We don't need to step through the same path or something. Anyway.
Yeah. Shazam, I often, just recently, I will look up, because you've got way more information on Spotify now, I'll look up the song, who wrote the songs, and then there's another little can of worms that I open, and then discover all these other songs, and yeah.
I, as one of the many things that I have to do to make a living, I DJ as well, and I find that these days playlisting is huge. So Spotify playlists and the algorithm, even though the algorithm is my enemy as a songwriter sometimes, it helps me find stuff that I like, and it's really cool that it tries to predict what you like based on stuff you've already listened to. And a lot of the time it actually lets the music speak for itself, and it's an artist you've never heard of or seen before. I do also find curators that I like for example, people who run community radio shows and stuff like that. I think if they make playlists, I'll usually subscribe to those playlists because they will collect things for you and curate things for you, and it's already at a really high standard that you might appreciate. So.
Can I just say one thing on that, though? Because I was thinking about this the other day. Actually, B and I had this thing where, I think it was last year and during lockdown, we're no new music. Pick one album, that's all you can listen to for a week. And it's so rewarding because you're it's so easy to get so much of, my little brother's do you like psychedelic Brazilian music? I'm I fucking love it. He's I've got all of it. He downloaded 32 gig of Brazilian psychedelic music from 68 to present day, and he's going to get through none of that. Like, he's going to know none of it. And so part of me is like, if you just find that one record or even a song and you just sit with it for a really long time, it opens up, and it's really healthy as a songwriter to get to know something that intimately. Because there's always, I don't know what the statistics are, it's like 10,000 songs are added to Spotify a fucking second or something.
Yeah,
it's really nuts. And a lot of them are really good.
Yeah.
Splice, you know.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. Let the music speak for itself. That's what we're here to do. And thank you all so much for coming to speak on behalf of the music today.
Thank you.
A warm round of applause. This is our panel. Thank you so much. Thanks guys.
Thank you. Great to hear you.
Yes, thank yourselves. That's right. Oh, it's lunchtime. So let's do it. There is bathrooms exactly the same place as before. More food up the back. That's for you guys. Take a break and we'll get ready for the workshops this afternoon. Thanks.